Hello and welcome to Daddy Issues. I'm here today with the king of the bourgeoisie, David Bryan. I haven't told you about this, David, but I've done something special for you today.
Yeah, I feel a little bit insulted, but I'm
No,
see where this goes.
no. I'll tell you why that is today, ladies and gentlemen. Because as the hard working class man that I am, I was insulted to message Dave and are you ready to record? And Dave says, sorry, I was napping. Napping. That's an ordinary thing that people do. So today for you, David, what I've done is I have changed out of my relaxing home clothes that I work in like a working person, and I put on trousers. I'm wearing actual trousers so I can put on my my suspenders that I've had ready to go like a working person. Wait, this is all a visual joke for an auditory. Then I've got my working
really
man's,
just for me.
Yeah, my working man's cap, and I'm gonna wear my sunglasses because I, Dominic Archer, father of the revolution, am here to take down your I was napping act.
You look like you should be a member of like a Dexy's Midnight Runners revival.
That's pretty much the plan. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, I'm kind of digging this vibe. It's like suspenders,
it's a good look.
like my steampunk glasses that I really like, flat peak cap. I'm wearing my Chromeo in support of Beirut t-shirt. All funds go to helping Beirut recover from the horrible explosion last year. Oh, and I'm wearing trousers, Dave. Look.
Proper suit trousers. Are they checked? Or is that a tartan?
Yeah, and don't look at my butt as well.
Well, all I can see is your butt, so you don't tell me not to look at your butt.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Well, I appreciate all your effort you put in to that little visual exploration you just took me on.
Well, to be honest, Dave, I was so upset at the idea that someone could spend their days asleep, as if that's not what the night is for. What was going on with you? Why were you napping away today?
Some days you just need a nap. Like there's nothing else that you can do but close your eyes for 10 minutes and just rejuvenate, hit reset. And when I woke up, I felt great. So it's just I think napping is a standard thing, or maybe it's just when you get to my age, Dom.
The old man.
Your body can't quite make it more than 7 hours before you need to have another sleep.
I feel like we need to take a photo of this moment to put on the podcast. But my are you recording on your phone?
I am, yeah, but I can also just go print screen.
Oh, nice.
But you want me to take a picture? I'll take a picture. Hold on.
I'll give the revolutionary fingers that are necessary.
All right, I'm going to full screen you.
Okay.
There we go. Ready? Hold that pose. Bam. Nice. Wait, one landscape.
Oh, okay.
But a bam? Is it bammed? There we go. Bam.
There we go. And hopefully
Preserved
some
for
of this actual
posterity.
photo taken might be edited out. However, those photos should probably be there. So, hello and welcome to Daddy Issues, the podcast where we talk about father and son relationships in popular culture. My name is Dominic, father of the revolution, Archer, and with me, as always, is David, king of the bourgeoisie, Bryan. These are now also our wrestling names. I should let you know.
Ladies and gentlemen,
King of the bourgeoisie.
Boom! Oh, it's the bourgeoisie. Bum, bum, bum. that was the Big Show theme song.
That was great. Now we need to go and buy like an old copy of a WWE game and create these people.
Today,
Which is how we have spent many weekends and sleepovers in the past.
So many hours have been spent as grown men playing 15-year-old wrestling games.
Yeah. I would wake up early if we had like crashed out at 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever. I would wake up early when everyone else was asleep and to do a few little like move set changes on my character, just so I was like really happy with them.
Yeah, that's the kind of perfectionism that I expect from you on an Xbox 360.
Yeah, those are the days.
Yeah.
Well, it was nice to care about something.
Now, neither of us have kids, so it's still entirely possible for us to still do this. It's not like our responsibilities have grown that much since those days.
No. I'm already gently planning for when the pandemic is over to come over to your end of the country and do that very thing.
Oh, well, I've been thinking, Dave, this is slightly off topic, but my plan for the moment the lockdown is over is I'm going to get an Airbnb somewhere remote. And I'm going to spend like 3 or 4 days there just completely on my own. Because the problem I've had here is being locked down with everybody else in the house. It's like essentially being imprisoned with your parents. And if there's some people you don't want to be in prison with, it's like, it's your mum, right? Because you're like, oh, God, Mum, I need to, like, prove myself the biggest guy in here. And I can't be the baddest motherfucker in the prison if you're always asking me about my laundry. You know?
Well, then the answer is obvious. You need to shank her.
No, the obvious answer is my mum is the baddest motherfucker in the prison. Right, of course.
Well, sure.
Of course.
Okay, sure. If you're willing to accept that.
Yeah, she'll ask everyone about their laundry. No, but my plan is I'm going to go spend like 3 or 4 days just on a remote place, just zenning out. And then after that, I need to hit up all the things I haven't been able to do in lockdown. And one of those things one of those things, because my dad listens to this, so let's just keep it,
Let's keep it kosher.
Keep it clean. One of those things will just have to be playing video games and seeing friends and stuff. And this seems like a good way of getting like an Airbnb, like in the New Forest or something like that, for a couple of days.
Yeah.
That would be
go
cool.
on walks and stuff. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, something for the future. We'll podcast from the Airbnb in the future.
Yeah.
Today, though, we are talking about a movie we discussed a couple of weeks ago, and then we said last week, oh my god, we didn't do the movie that we discussed, and so we've watched it, and that is Honey Boy, the Shia LaBeouf semi-autobiographical movie of his childhood, where he is essentially playing his father. And this was a David Bryan recommendation. And when that comes around, folks, you know you're up for something good. None of that trashy shit when David Bryan recommends a movie. So, Dave, what was it about Honey Boy that drew you in?
I think I saw something on YouTube around the time that this was being released in 2019 about Shia talking about this and sort of giving a few details about what his relationship with his dad was like. And even then I was like, that sounds like a daddy issues. And then we brought it up, didn't we, when we were talking about Straight Outta Compton, because these are the probably only 2 examples in modern cinema that we could think of where an actor plays their own father in a movie of their father, kind of their father's life. With I kept calling him Curtis Jackson.
O'Shea Jackson Jr.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I kept calling Ice Cube's son 50 Cent in the Straight Outta Compton podcast, but his name was O'Shea Jackson Jr. Got to play his dad in a time before he was born, whereas in this one, Shia LaBeouf is playing his dad and then acting opposite another actor who's playing himself as a child. So the whole concept as itself is really interesting, and the idea that it's also a very traumatic and destructive relationship is something we haven't really touched a great deal on. We haven't had that many negative father-son relationships discussed so far. So I think it's going to be a nice direction to take it in, especially in comparison to Straight Outta Compton.
Yeah, it is a great counterpoint to Straight Outta Compton, because one of the things we were talking about with Compton was, can this movie be honest when O'Shea Jackson is played by O'Shea Jackson Jr., and the whole movie is like, Ice Cube was the smartest guy, he was so talented, he always did the right thing, and like one time he smashed up that record, the record producers thing, and that was a little bit sketchy. But generally Ice Cube comes off as being, amazing in Straight Outta Compton. When portrayed by his son. Whereas Honey Boy is like, here's what my childhood was like, and it weren't great. It's a completely different take, where Shia LaBeouf wrote the movie as well. So he wrote his story, but then also stars in it as kind of the antagonist, I suppose, which is his father. And if you could call them an antagonist, I don't know that you really could. But they're both kind of co-protagonists. But yeah, the father is definitely the causer of many ills. Hi, Daddy Issues listeners. This is Dom with the Daddy Issues First, which is an actual insert into the podcast. Because at this point in our discussion, before we even got into the movie, we wanted to lay out the domestic abuse allegations that FKA Twigs, the female star of Honey Boy, recently laid out against her former boyfriend, Shia LaBeouf, the star and writer of Honey Boy. She put out a lawsuit recently with full of just absolutely horrendous things. I won't go into so much detail here. It's been pretty widely publicized now. But within our conversation, it was kind of clear that, especially on my part, I was trying to vocalize coherent thoughts within our discussion, but it wasn't quite there. And so listening back in our editing process, I said to Dave, I'm not overly comfortable with it, especially what I said. I didn't want anything to come across as being insensitive, or to certainly not to lay any blame for the situation on FK Twigs herself. But the point of the conversation now was the tragic irony that comes with a couple meeting each other on the set of a movie about abuse. And Shia LaBeouf and FKA Twigs met on the making of Honey Boy, which is obviously, as an autobiographical story, is laying out the abuse that Shia LaBeouf faced as a kid and then the abusive person that he would grow into. And yeah, that tragic irony that comes with him then dealing out that very abuse himself against his former co-star and his romantic partner. And for my part, I would say that most of the conversation was Shia LaBeouf can kind of go fuck himself, and I think you'll find more of that as the podcast goes on anyway. But yes, this was just a little explanation. Oh, the other thing we said was we were surprised that the FKA Twigs was from Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, which is like 20 miles from where I live. She's not from Los Angeles. And there was a little question of does that affect her believability in the role? Turns out no, because she's a really great artist. But yes, that was basically it. I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast. But we haven't really had a chance to jump into the film itself yet, so let's get into Honey Boy. I mean, it's a great movie. That kind of almost feels like we haven't touched upon it yet, but it almost goes without saying. It is brilliant, and I was really, really impressed. I don't think it gave me anything that I wasn't necessarily expecting from the trailer and from what I'd heard about it before. I feel like it delivered almost exactly what I expected it to deliver. Which is not necessarily which isn't a bad thing, right? It's not like this movie was just as good as I thought it was gonna be. But you know what I mean? There wasn't a bit where it suddenly played a twist on the narrative. It set itself out to be the evolution of himself as a child and as an adult, and it did kind of exactly that. Did it ring true to your perceptions of Shia LaBeouf as you perceived him before?
Yeah, it did. It gave me the way that Noah Jupe, who plays young Otis in the film, which is the character based on Shia as a child. I felt like he was doing a very in like the imaginary timeline of Shia LaBeouf's life from when he was a public figure to now. If you put in the Noah Jupe performance at the beginning of that timeline, I'd buy it. Like, I think that is, I can imagine him as a 12-year-old being that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the chronology and the narrative definitely satisfied me, and it did ring true. And what I found interesting about the film, which I did really like it, was sort of the more artistic choices that the director made, with some sort of dream sequences and cutting very quickly through like flashback kind of things, and that elevated it beyond just a regular biopic or biography or whatever you wanted to call it.
Yeah. 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 It's almost a difficult movie to talk about because there's not so much of a plot to it, really, is there? The plot kind of follows the older Shia LaBeouf, played by Lucas Hedges, and it's him detailing his experiences through rehab and trying to play out his childhood until he can reach a cathartic release over his father. The director, Alma Har'el, this is her first feature film, I think. And it's a fucking strong showing for your first feature film.
Big time.
Yeah.
For a relatively small budget, I think the budget was like $3.5 million, and it practically made that back. They didn't make any profit on it, but that's for what money they had. I thought it was really well put together.
Yeah. What did you think, if we do a comparison? What did you think of Noah Jupe as the younger version and Lucas Hedges as the older version of the same character? Did you kind of buy them together as various versions of him?
To be honest, like I didn't see a strong link between them. I thought each of their performances was really good, especially young Noah Jupe. I thought he was really incredible, and also British, surprisingly.
Oh, I didn't know.
No. So yeah, I thought he was especially good and raw, and I get the sense that when Shia was playing his dad in those scenes where they were quite aggressive or emotional, they kind of talk over each other a bit in a kind of a natural way. And I can imagine Shia being the kind of performer that he is, that he was kind of doing a lot of riffing and sort of getting lost in the character and stuff. But Noah held his own completely, and they like stayed in the moment, stayed in the character, and they could have some back and forths that sounded a bit messy and almost non-movie like, non-cinematic. But it really affected, in a positive way, how emotional those scenes were, because they seemed more real. Totally. When it came, and then with Lucas, he was strange to me, because I felt sometimes when listening to him speak, if I closed my eyes, I would have thought it was Shia. Like he even changed his voice somehow to sound like him. And I think I read that he moved into Shia's house, or at least showed up and hung out with Shia all the time in preparation for it, to the point where Shia was getting a bit weirded out. And so Shia left and went to stay in a hotel so that Lucas and Noah could move into his house together. So which I think is a really great sort of strategy. Sure, get the two actors who are playing the same character together, because in an interview they mentioned that they intentionally put a few kind of like physical traits into their performances that hopefully you would see appearing in both timelines, which I must have missed. Maybe they were quite subtle, I missed them, so maybe that's on me. But and then also to have them live together in the house of the person that they're playing, who's a real life person, that's taking a lot of going to a lot of lengths to try and get it as authentic as possible. So I'll put it on myself that perhaps I didn't see a great link, but it seems like a lot of work went into it, and individually they were really great.
Yeah, I bought Noah as the young Shia LaBeouf, and I bought Lucas Hedges as the older Shia LaBeouf, but I didn't necessarily see the connection between them, which is such a strange thing to say. Because obviously I bought both of them as different versions of the same person, but I didn't buy both of them as versions of each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wonder how much of that is supposed to be intentional, because the directing itself is very different for each bit. The cinematography is very different for the bits with Noah as the younger one, especially around the motel, because it's full of these neon these neon colors that you get around the motel from the lights, and whereas with Lucas at the rehab center, it's much more muted. Right? It's these muted kind of grey colours that come from being in an area of rehab, and the only neon kind of colours we get are at the beginning when he's still able to take drugs and to drink, and then we go back to him as a child. And I think I definitely bought it at the end of the movie. There's that kind of dream sequence where the older Lucas goes back to the motel to see his father, kind of in the way that it's not, it doesn't seem like it's literal or not. It's really difficult to see if it was supposed to be literal or not.
It's subtle, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I bought it as a dream as well, or kind of an imaginary, or like a visual representation of older Shia coming to a place in himself.
Yes.
So there is some artistic bent to the way a film's made.
Yeah. So I wonder how much of it, from a filmmaking point of view, was supposed to be a deliberate separation between those two, right? Whereas they are being the same person, but the character of Otis of Shia is so different at those different parts of his life that they should feel like two different people. Like the opening of the movie is him on the set of what is presumably Transformers, being blown away by an explosion, right? And then we're introduced to the younger version of him with the same thing again, but it's a pie in the face gag.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that, like, this is where his life has gone, or where, his life has reached this point now where he's being thrown across massive sets with explosions on, like, giant Hollywood productions. But it all started with a pie in the face. And that's kind of where these two, he's almost not the same person, right? He is, but he's not. And it's I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
I do buy that, because presumably as he's going to go through some of the most formative years of his life between ages of 12 and 22, which is when the two sort of time periods that run parallel are set. So it makes sense that he would be really different as a man than from being 12, because I don't know if you think that this is reflected in the movie, but in real life, I think the last film in which Shia's dad was around for, and Shia was paying him for as his like chaperone or whatever, was Constantine,
right?
Which is what, 2000 and what do you want to say? I'm going to say 2005.
Yeah, I was going to say 2004, 2005. Yeah.
And the winner is 2005.
Yeah.
So Shia has a good year then. I think he does iRobot and then Constantine. I think the year after he did Bobby, the Bobby Kennedy biopic. But so in 2005 is when he cuts his dad out of his life, when he's 19? Yeah, 19. So these are, like I say, just super formative years, and all the damage is carried on. It's not like it's not like this film he's 12 years old and then after this his dad is gone. Like, following the timeline of this movie, his dad is still around, still being his dad for the next 7 years. So if we I know there's an attempt to offer some kind of reconciliation between young Otis and his dad towards the end of the movie, but people don't change dramatically. He's still going to be who he is and still treat Otis the same way you would expect.
Yeah, I think the movie does a good job of that as well, of showing them trying to be better people. But we can tell from Lucas Hedges, from the older version of him, that there was no perfect solution for the two of them when he was young, right? There was no bit where Otis was like, where James, the father figure, was like, I'm going to be a better dad to you now. And then he actually was. Right? Like, the end of the movie gives that idea of they become closer. And Otis has that moment of, I want you to be a real dad. I want you to be an actual dad. And James responds to that by taking him to a marijuana farm that he's growing on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And that's their father and son moment, right? Their father and son reconciliation is, look at all this weed that we're growing. And Otis is like, what if they find you, the police or the city? And he's like, that's fine. No one's gonna notice. And it's like, your son is on a major, he's a celebrity, right? And you're his guardian, and you're growing marijuana at the side of the road for what reason? It's
It's this weird kind of grapple for independence by the father instead of by the adolescent or pre-adolescent son, which is weird. But I suppose I also thought about that moment from the perspective of a kid who wants his dad around, whose dad has been in jail, and if he gets busted for something else again, how much longer is he going to be locked away for and not be around? Because despite everything that Otis and his dad, it's what Otis is put through by his dad, there's quite a physical and violent confrontation where Otis still says to him, I want you to be here.
As he's hitting him almost,
he's hitting him. So it's like, well, he obviously says he still loves him and obviously feels like he needs him and is not ready to kind of turn the screw on his dad and say, you actually are really shit and you're actually causing me a lot of damage. But he's 12, so he's not in a position to rationalize that way and turn this disruptive and abusive figure away, because at the end of the day it's still his dad, and that's who every 12-year-old thinks they need to have their dad around.
I think maybe rather than just going through the actual plot of the movie, because as we said, it's a character story rather than an actual plot. It's kind of difficult to just do it. What were the scenes themselves that stuck out to you as being really strong within the movie? What are the ones that when you think back on Honey Boy, that were the scenes that will really stick with you?
Okay, I've got I'll give you one from young Otis and one from older Otis. The one from young Otis from 1995 is when I think they have Otis and his dad have a row, and James just leaves the motel, gets in his bike and fucks off, and just leaves Otis on his own. And that's when Otis starts to bond with the young girl who lives across the way, who's played by FKA Twigs. And they have this very kind of strange interaction in their hotel room where they're very intimate with each other.
Yeah, it's almost sexual.
It's almost. Or like you feel like a little bit uncomfortable. Like, is this film really going to go this way?
Yeah.
Because she's, I don't know, like she looks quite young. So I would say...
I think she's like late teens, early 20s, I would guess.
Yeah, I would say youngest she would be 16, 17. And she could be in her early 20s. It's hard to really say, but he's 12. But they get very physically close to each other. But then it ends in quite a sweet way. It doesn't go anywhere weird. And they spend some time together. And that scene, I think, particularly would have felt more inappropriate if we hadn't seen some kind of essence of an artistic, non-mainstream kind of bent to this film.
Yeah.
If it had been very straight and narrow, then it would have been more uncomfortable. But because we've seen some things that didn't actually happen in this movie, and the way I thought was maybe how we can tell what parts are real and what parts not is what you were talking about with the neon lighting. Because the more obvious dream or imaginary sequences are very much lit in sort of pink and blue and purple, and it becomes quite obvious. And I think that maybe that scene in the motel room has a bit of that, but there's certainly the following scene where they're outdoors, and they have this whole like conversation in mime.
The mime baseball.
Yeah.
It's beautiful,
like, and he's
beautifully shot.
Yeah, it's a beautiful scene where they like play it like baseball, and he like pretends to fall, but again, the background lighting is really
clowning,
pink.
Right? He's doing
the
clown. His father is a former rodeo clown, and that's the mannerisms that he's taken on that have led him to being a childhood TV star, essentially, this character.
Yeah,
So
I think
he's
he started off doing stand-up comedy, I think, and that's how he got an agent. It was doing
Right.
comedy, and then he decided he wanted to be an actor.
Right.
So he's always had that performance thing. But that sequence was so much more powerful and beautiful in silence, in mannerisms. It was almost like a dance between them that was way more affecting than if it had been written in dialogue, if they had compared stories. And because I think the family which Shy Girl, who she's credited as in the movie, also lives with her parents, who can be a little bit loud and yell at her and stuff. So maybe they could have had my parents suck, my dad sucks too. But instead of having that sort of negative reinforcement, they share in some beautiful, innocent, really just lovely, almost ethereal kind of experience together, which is really sweet, which ends with them falling asleep, I think, and her cradling him like a child, which I thought was really sweet. So that's the sequence that sticks out for me from young. And then older Otis, a lot of the therapy stuff really struck me, particularly when he's speaking with his therapist and she's putting him through these exercises, and he seems quite out of control initially, and like the anger is just too much, and he won't do the things that she's telling him to do, despite the fact that they clearly seem to be working in calming him down, bringing him back into the room and stuff. And just as that gradually went on, and those kind of sequences over time, they were quite powerful to me, and culminating in a scene where he's reading the script that he's written. He's been spending time writing about his dad in the form of a script and writing about his childhood, and then he has to read it to her, and he just cries through it. And that was super, super powerful. And I wondered if it affected me more because I'm going through an experience with therapy now, and if I'd watched it 2 years ago, or if I watched it when it came out, whether it would have been a lot more removed from me and I wouldn't have felt anything about it. It would have just been, an interesting development for the characters or whatever. But yeah, I think this film was well measured and used a lot of moments like that to really sort of sucker punch in and affect you emotionally. Yeah, those are the ones that stand out.
Yeah, I thought that scene with FK Twigs, well, that whole relationship actually was really good, because the father clearly has sexual desire for her, and the father is in competition with his son, a one-sided competition in which the father wants to better his son, and is jealous of his son's success because he was a rodeo clown and then ended up going to prison. And his son is a successful actor on TV, and his dad has to be there to look after him. But he is jealous of his son's success to such an extent that he's even telling a 12-year-old boy that he's got a tiny dick.
Right? Yeah, and it's emasculating a child.
Yeah. And he says, he makes a joke about his son's balls dropping, and he's like, "Dad, I'm 12." And I think, and then the older version, who is played by Shia LaBeouf, makes some joke about the younger one says it gets the job done, and the other father says, "What job?" And the younger one's like, "Girls," like that. And it's 12 is such a interesting age for this, because he's clearly still a child, but his father is trying to drag him into manhood so that he can compete with him, right? And because you can't justify competing with a child, but if you think that he's older, like if you put him as like 16 years old or 17 years old, then you could actually have a man-to-man like competition. So his father wants to, he's giving him cigarettes, he's giving him alcohol, like he's doing this stuff, to try and drag him into a position where they can have a confrontation. But he can't, because his son is a boy, and all he wants is his father to love him, whereas what his father wants is, to prove that he's better, or to prove that he's not worthless, rather. and he, that inferiority that Shia LaBeouf just plays perfectly comes from the fact that he's been, everything he's ever achieved in his life has been beaten by a 12-year-old already, who's got a successful TV show, who's, the only thing he can't do is have sex with a girl because he's 12. But his father keeps pushing him to be older, almost trying to push him into puberty. And that's, I think, why the relationship with FKA Twigs is so really beautiful, and a relationship that we don't get to see very much outside of, I would say, often anime. Anime does it quite a lot, where they have teenagers on the verge of puberty, where it's like you still have the innocence of childhood, but you're about to go through this transformation in which you're kind of like corrupted by the desires of the adult world. And that's the exact point that Otis stands at in this movie, and why the dynamic with him and the child and FKA Twigs is like, which way is this gonna go? Right? Is it going to go that he is still a boy capable of love, like of non-sexual love, or has his father corrupted him to such an extent that even as a 12-year-old boy, this was a phrase I thought of in the movie and wanted to bring up, his love has become transactional. And there's that, and what you're saying in that bit with FK Twigs is just absolutely fucking amazing. And like my stomach dropped, was they spend the night together and they just hug, and you have that bit where it's like, are they gonna make out? But they kind of just, they touch each other's faces and they kiss each other on the cheek, and it doesn't become sexual, it becomes loving. And then he gives her money at the end, and it's like he just prostituted her love. And that was like, to me, that was a moment that my stomach kind of dropped, because it's like, he's never going to be able to have a proper relationship, like a loving relationship, right? And it's because he has to pay his father to chaperone him on set. And as he says later on in the movie, you wouldn't be here if I didn't pay you, right? And because Shia LaBeouf has that moment where he says, what do you think it feels like to be paid, to be paid by your 12-year-old son? For your boss to be your 12-year-old son. You wouldn't be here if I didn't pay you. And that's how he's going to view every loving relationship that he has for the rest of his life, right? What is the transaction here? And he gives her money after they embrace each other. And I thought, oh no, that's going to be it now, right? She's going to be insulted. She's going to, turn him away. She's going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe you tried to pay me for that. But it doesn't happen. Like, her love is consistent. And the next time they spend time together, that element is kind of removed. It's not there anymore. It's kind of like he's still a boy. He's capable of love and affection without that transaction being in place. But ultimately, his father, if he just got rid of that fucking dad, it's yeah. I don't know. I feel like I've gone on a lot about that one scene, but it was so good.
No, I think it's a really important scene though, and you've actually given it more importance than I had clocked at the time about the transactional nature of love in that way. I hadn't made that link, and yeah, that's really brilliant both on your part for spotting it and for the movie for creating that. Like, that's really poignant and powerful, and as well as we're seeing a bit of present day, or like rather 2005 Shia LaBeouf in one half of this movie. We as the audience also have everything that happened since then in the media and in the what do you call the shit newspapers that only tell gossip, tabloids. Thank you. Yeah. So we know where this goes beyond where the film is going to end. So having this kind of precursor, this seed planted, you're absolutely right. Shit, he's never going to be able to have a proper relationship.
Yeah. And that bit at the end of the movie where he almost gets rid of his father, and his father kind of suggests, oh, he's going to turn over a new leaf, but we know ultimately he doesn't. If he could just get away from that influence and have, not a normal childhood, but as they say numerous times in the movie, he's always acting, right? Every single part of his life is a performance of one kind or another. And the only time where that brings him joy is the baseball mime scene. That's the only time where he's performing and actually getting joy from it. Is the scene where he with him and FKA Twigs, where they are, or Shy Girl, the character, where they're miming the baseball and laughing, and he's doing it for her enjoyment, and they share a bubble of happiness together there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me, actually, there's an interesting part of that round table video on YouTube from the Hollywood Reporter, where Shia talks about what playing his dad taught him about acting in more of a general sense. And the film, I think, touches on this too, about how the pain which he carries as an adult from his dad has been a kind of a gift. Like, it's helped him in his acting, and he can always tap into that whenever he needs to, and out comes the stuff that gets him paid. That's what gets him hired for new jobs, is because he can tap into something. But in that discussion, he says that what this performance allowed him to do is to empathize with something that he always saw as negative and destructive, and an energy that he could only use for a certain thing, and that kind of freed him of it, because he talks about how, like, anger and aggression and rage, that kind of stuff comes easy as an actor, but what's hard is being sincere and being genuine and being sweet and coming, and to achieve that, you have to come into it from a place of love. You can't take pain and anger and turn it into something sweet and loving. But that's all he had. He says, I had no technique. All I had was this feeling that I could draw on whenever I wanted to, and I could spit it out as a performance. So, having said that, he says the hardest thing to get from people as a performer is a genuine laugh or a genuine smile. Like, I suppose he means you can put people on edge with a dark performance, but that is easier than achieving something light and good, which he didn't know he really could do. Having said that, he was in Even Stevens, where he had to be silly every day. So I guess he could draw on something and turn it into something positive. But that's he clearly has his life as a performer is in two halves, up until the point where he played his dad and who he is afterwards. And I'm interested to see whatever he comes up with next, and whether there's a noticeable difference either in the outcome or in his approach. And I know that he's in that Netflix thing, Pieces of a Woman, which kind of was released right around when this story came out last year. So all of the thumbnails and stuff on Netflix are just of Vanessa Kirby, I think, is the lead actress of that. Like, I think it's a double header. What's the phrase? Basically, there are two. There's a man and a woman lead in the movie, whatever the industry term is for that, and he's the male lead, but he's in none of the promotional pictures because they're like, shit, no one's going to watch this if the people know Shia LaBeouf's in it. And apparently it's quite good, and he's quite good. But so I'd see what happens next.
Yeah, I think that's. I don't want to go through it scene by scene again, because I don't want to take away any of the beauty from the movie, which is really present, by just kind of trying to explain it as well. But it's one of the things ultimately that is quite upsetting, and why I think I had to have that conversation about the FKA Twigs allegations up top, was after watching it, you really want him to get his shit together, right? And you don't want history to repeat itself, especially when he is so present in that moment. And the fact that even after this, Right, even after all of this, with putting it on screen, with having that therapeutic performance, with that Hollywood moment for catharsis where he plays his own father, this is the time in the autobiographical movie about him where he shreds that trauma, and is like they say in the fucking movie, the seed is reborn into a flower. You know, they say the seed needs to destroy itself to flower. And you know, you want him to become a new person, and then 2 years later, well, 1 year later, his girlfriend, who was in the movie, says that he's being abusive and he's being controlling and he's being all of these things that he detailed in this thing, and it's like, God damn it. Right.
Yeah, and like as a fan as well, like I've always liked him as an actor. Like, everything he's in, I think he's brilliant. And there are certain films where I think his performance kind of went under the radar a bit of how actually brilliant he is. Like Lawless. Do you see Lawless with
no, it's
Tom
the
Hardy?
Prohibition
one.
Yeah.
He's brilliant in that. And Fury, the World War II tank thing with Brad Pitt. He's great in that. Like he gets some really great roles and he nails them. Like he knocks them out of the park, and in a strangely, I don't know, like they're always quite intense, I suppose, and he can definitely mine something for these more intense things. I don't think he's done anything particularly uplifting or upbeat since.
Well, Peanut Butter Falcon was meant to be a bit more of that, but playing a complex character again.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see that one as well, because they both came out sort of around the same time, didn't they? That and Honey Boy, and I think he's that's the one. For anyone who doesn't know, Peanut Butter Falcon is about him and a young man with Down syndrome, and I think Shia has said that his relationship with the actor with Down syndrome in that movie has kind of helped him stay sober, helped him stay on the straight and narrow, and helped him check himself. And I can only speculate as to why, but you know, hopefully he's getting involved in things that better himself, because I'm rooting for him. I am. I think I want him to straighten out, and I want him to have a good life and be a positive figure in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I don't want him to be one of these bad boys that you love to hate. I don't want another Mel Gibson.
No, well, yeah, that's the thing, is that at this point he's not even a bad boy, right? He's not the youth actor who's gone out partying and then, you know, he's just becoming a monster of Hollywood that at some point has to be removed, right? You know what I mean? Where it's like,
well, here's a good example of the trajectory that I would hope he could emulate. And that's kind of the Robert Downey Jr. thing.
Yes, yeah.
Where he was
that's the
untouchable for so long. Because his behaviour was so bad and so public.
Yeah.
People were like, I mean, he's obviously talented, but he's also a fuck up. So let's just get rid of him. And it wasn't until, you know, Jon Favreau came knocking on the door and said, hey, John, I'll play a superhero, that now we think of Robert Downey Jr. as this darling of cinema. But I suppose you could go that way, or you can go more kind of on the way of, you can go the Christian Bale route, where you're kind of unabashedly an arsehole to people, but you keep making great work, and so people keep hiring you and people keep giving you awards, but nobody really wants to know you. Well, no one wants to be your friend because you're a bit of a shit.
Yeah, this is kind of an opposite question to what we had in Straight Outta Compton. Because in Straight Outta Compton, the question was, do you trust that the film is honest, given who produced the film and who was starring in the film? With this one, do I trust that the movie was honest, even though it was written by him and starring him? Yes, I trust the honesty of this movie more than I trust the honesty of Straight Outta Compton. But do I empathise with this movie as much, knowing that he hasn't changed now? I find that more difficult. now. Because I empathise with Eazy-E in Straight Outta Compton, even though I know that he did some pretty bad shit. Right? He wasn't a perfect person. But his trajectory was tragic. And that's where the problem comes into Straight Outta Compton with like the portrayal of Dr. Dre, is that it only shows his rise and it doesn't critique him in any way. There's no critique of Dr. Dre. Even when his partner drives off with their baby, it's like, oh, poor Dr. Dre, his partner drove off with their baby. Rather than, maybe you should have been at home with your partner and your baby, Dr. Dre, right? It's like, how terrible that she drove away with his baby, right?
They never mention it again after that, do they?
No, exactly. Whereas in Honey Boy, we get a dive into what made him the person he was, and we get to see the opportunity for him to redeem himself, right? Because he's literally there, right? We get it. It's right there. And then the fact that he... Am I wasting my time with this? Right? Am I wasting my time investing in him and his childhood story and his adult story? Am I wasting my my investment and my emotions in somebody who is unable to process anything other than abuse for the people who love him? You know?
Yeah.
And do I want to give him that empathy when the people that love him are the ones who get hurt the most? And he can say in his statement, oh, often the ones I'm closest to are the ones I hurt the most. Then fucking don't hurt them. I know it's not that easy. Obviously it's not that easy. That's what the whole movie is about. And that's what he encapsulates in the performance of his father, right? But in 30 years' time, there could easily be Honey Boy 2, where the son of Shia LaBeouf is playing Shia LaBeouf, being exactly the same as his father was.
Yeah. And that's the more believable trajectory, really.
Yeah.
Like, you want to have hope
for
that people can change and better themselves and get the help they need and put their darkness in the rear view. But yeah, with someone like Shia and his dad and Shia's real dad had similar abuse from his parents. Mm-hmm. Both of them were alcoholics, and Shia's dad is an alcoholic and Shia himself is an alcoholic. So there is this kind of repeating pattern that is just being passed down and down and down. And when it comes to kids, I suppose you would hope that people get their shit together before they have kids. Mm-hmm. And don't stumble into a situation where you're around a very malleable, very I don't know, I can't think of a better word than malleable. I'm quite happy with my first word there, malleable. A child, whilst you're trying to figure out your shit, or whilst you're not even trying to figure out your shit, you're just spraying your shit all over the place and your child is right in the front row. This is a bit of a downer.
The movie is kind of a bit of a downer. But I can't think of a movie recently that I enjoyed so much, that was so well made, that's just like a 9 out of 10 movie, that I've come away from feeling, should I have enjoyed that as much now? And it is his relationship, like his real relationship with FKA Twigs, that has turned this for me. Because again, her performance is incredible. She is so good in this movie. And they will be forever bound in my consciousness now because of this performance and because what I know of their relationship.
Yeah.
But I can't think of another movie like this that has that. It's almost like The Notebook. Right?
Oh, that's not the film I was expecting.
No, where Ryan Adams, Ryan Gosling and Rachel Adams they delivered like their for that time it was their performances, right? Like their defining performances of that period was The Notebook, and they gave such this romantic, beautiful, love story to be all love story performances because they were actually in a relationship together, or and then they broke up, and then you had to watch The Notebook with the heartbreak of knowing that this perfect on-screen couple weren't actually together anymore, right? And it's like, and that makes it like it makes it a bittersweet love story to know that their love ultimately failed where their characters' love succeeded, right? And it's like that.
Yeah.
It's that thing back into real life where the Hollywood love story ultimately collapses on itself because it's a Hollywood idea of what love is.
Yeah, I had a similar experience the other day watching The Amazing Spider-Man, knowing that Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield aren't together anymore in real life, and it was kind of upsetting.
Yes, that's what I mean. But now imagine that you found out that Andrew Garfield had abused Emma Stone. Right? You'd look back at that performance and be like, oh, it didn't work out and that's really terrible. And also now, can I even enjoy this movie when I know what it ultimately leads to? And that movie isn't even about... It would be like Andrew Garfield is playing Uncle Ben and with a younger Peter Parker in that, I don't know. It's... Or Peter Parker himself is playing Uncle Ben.
Yeah. That's the only way that analogy works.
Yeah. We've manifested Peter Parker. Tobey Maguire is playing Uncle Ben for Andrew Garfield. Yeah. But it's so. It's just. It's such a good movie, and I'm so conflicted about it.
Well, I think that's powerful stuff as well. I mean, there are really obvious examples of musicians who make great music, but then what they've done privately is abhorrent, and then maybe they've been punished for it, maybe they haven't. But you go, well, am I allowed to listen to that song that was in the end of The Joker by Gary Glitter, or am I not?
No,
it's objectively a good song.
No, this is the Loudon Wainwright effect again. We're back to Loudon Wainwright. This is the Loudon Wainwright movie of movies. No, it's the Rufus Wainwright, Loudon Wainwright. It's the same thing. It's the same thing all over again. Where Rufus Wainwright covers his father's album, and you think he's found some kind of catharsis from it, but ultimately he, fuck it, I don't know.
It's a real web.
Yeah.
These kind of things, and that we can't pretend like we know all of the answers, or we can't necessarily justify everything.
Yeah.
But it's because But then I think this is a great element of art, and we've seen in Shia's recent career that he has a predilection for art and pushing the boundaries of what art is. So, and I think this kind of falls into that category. He can do this, and then he can do that Rob Cantor video of that's the Shia LaBeouf song, and then at the end Shia LaBeouf's in the auditorium and applauds like fucking Citizen Kane. Mm-hmm. And we're like, oh, Shia, he's so much fun, like he there he is having a good time. Meanwhile, that probably means more to him than just that, and he can do that that installation where he sits and watches all his movies in a row and just laughs, and then that's put up in a museum. Or didn't he do some street theatre thing? I can't really remember. Or that Sia video where he dances with that little girl that got a little bit of controversy around it. He does. He seems to me like someone who's reaching beyond the sort of the boundaries of what reality is and what art is and what cinema is and what being a person is, and just going, let's see what happens if I go over that line. Yeah. And he's really funny in iRobot.
But that's the young Shia that we see there. right?
Yeah, like
That's-
18-year-old Shia.
Yeah, that's where. Yes, the problem with this movie is that it's all about cultivating your understanding for a person seeking redemption. Right? And that's ultimately what all the characters in this movie are looking for. Is all of the characters are looking for redemption in one way or another. And as the person who wrote in this and starred in it, he is vocalizing his father's search for redemption in that way, and then his own acknowledgement of that's what he's looking for as well. But that he claims to be looking for it, and that I empathize with his search for redemption, and then he continues to hurt people, makes it very difficult for me to sympathize with him again. I wish I'd watched Peanut Butter Falcon first, because now when I do watch it, and I did want to watch it, I'm carrying across the emotional baggage that I'm bringing from Honey Boy, which is tied into the emotional baggage of his real life, right? Because you can't. It's not like you can say, "Oh, but can you distinguish Beat It by Michael Jackson from the allegations against Michael Jackson?" Yeah, probably, because Beat It isn't about children, right? Like the two aren't connected. Maybe We Are the World, We Are the Children. That's another. We'll leave that. I think that was one of his famous Super Bowl performances. But Shia LaBeouf has made a movie where he is so entangled within his own trauma that to see him continue to act out that trauma in real life impacts on the viewing of the movie and is indistinguishable. But because he has produced this in such an open way, that will then be carried across to his other performances, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So yeah, I know, because like I said earlier, like he never thought he was going to be able to be allowed to be in this.
Yeah.
So if this movie came out written by Shia LaBeouf, but then that's it, he's not producer, he's not director, he's not in it at all, would you be able? Would you look at him as an actor in a different way?
Yes, I would look at the movie in a different way. Yes. Yeah. Because the strength of the movie is that he plays his own father, right? That is what makes his performance of his father, which is this Oscar-worthy performance, right? The fact that he wasn't nominated is kind of a crime. I think the fact that this movie wasn't nominated for more Oscars is kind of a crime, because he should have been nominated for this performance, I think. But the artistic investment from the audience comes from the cathartic release of him writing and performing his own father, right? That's where the investment comes in. If somebody else played it, it would be like, oh, it's an interesting biography, I guess. But it would be like just watching Straight Outta Compton without O'Shea Jackson Jr. with somebody else playing Ice Cube. You'd be like, yeah, it's a good movie about NWA. But the fact that O'Shea Jackson Jr. plays Ice Cube is what lends it that element of extra realism, right?
Do you think?
I think that performance, like, you can't distinguish between him not playing Ice Cube in that movie, I think. And in this one, if it was another very good actor who gave a performance comparable to Shia LaBeouf in an imaginary world, it would still not be the same movie, because it's not Shia LaBeouf doing it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree of that in terms of Honey Boy. But in terms of Straight Outta Compton, I don't think it needed O'Shea Jackson Jr. to play Ice Cube.
No, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because ultimately it's a story about NWA and their influence and their place in American culture and American history. So it becomes a bit more of an Easter egg, a bit of a novelty that O'Shea Jackson Jr. plays his dad. It didn't need to be, but they did it, and he was great, and that made the film better, no doubt. But yeah, this film needs Shia to play his dad, because otherwise, like you say, it's just a dramatic story about a young actor, and the fact that it's Shia probably is the reason it got made.
Yeah.
You hear so many films where actors who want to get into the producing game, the first few films they produce, they have to act in them because no one wants to give them the money to make a movie unless their movie star's in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, this movie could have been made for 250 grand, with Z-list actors in it, and it would have been a good story, but nobody would have seen it. Whereas the fact that it's Shia and it does become this kind of form of, well, the director said that this is more than just an expensive form of therapy.
Yeah.
This isn't just therapeutic for Shia. I think it does improve its value as art because of it.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's true. Yeah. Its position as art is increased by it. But then although the director does an amazing job, and it's a strange movie because I don't see it as the director's movie. Again, like the director it's an amazingly directed film. Again, as we said, the cinematography is gorgeous, but it is Shia LaBeouf's movie to me. Not to take away from the contributions of everybody else from in the film.
Yeah, I mean, if it had been a big name director, then
Yes.
it would have been their movie. But yeah, you're right, because it's a first-time director or first-time feature director.
Yes.
And everyone knows it's the movie which Shia LaBeouf wrote about his own life. Then yeah, you're right. It's his, and I did presume he had produced it too, but he's nowhere.
Right.
He's
He doesn't
listed
have a
nowhere
producing
beyond.
credit.
Yeah. So he didn't have any say, any power, maybe, other than if some big name writers sometimes have a bit of sway on the casting or whatever or anything. He did. I think he's quite a collaborative person, but.
Yeah. But this is one of
you.
those movies where you can't separate the artist and the art.
Yeah,
And Peanut Butter Falcon, on the other hand, you can, because he's just an actor in a movie. And so you could separate the artist and the art. But when you have a movie with such towering strength in which you cannot, it's like this is going to be a really stupid comparison, but it's like watching Keanu Reeves after The Matrix. Right, where Keanu Reeves has given his performance in The Matrix, and then everything he's in for the next 10 years is Neo. It's Neo from The Matrix, right? And but before that, you had it's Ted from Bill and Ted, and he couldn't get any serious roles for like 10 years. And when he did, it was like in fucking Dracula, but everyone's like, it's Ted in Dracula, like you can't take him seriously.
Well, yeah, it was either Ted or it was Jack from Speed. He's an action hero. That's
Right. Yeah. And that's the kind of the same thing with Shia LaBeouf. Now, he never suffered that before. It was never like, oh, it's the guy from Transformers, right? Or maybe, oh, it's the kid from Even Stevens. But ultimately,
if you're of a certain generation,
but he transcended that easily when he became like an action kind of actor. But for me now, this is it, right? Anytime I see Shia LaBeouf in a movie, it's going to be remember that performance that he gave in Honey Boy, and then remember how he didn't fucking grow as a person.
Well, that's the thing. This is an unfinished story. He's still he's about the same age as me. He's still in his early 30s. Like, there's a long way of his journey still to come, and we might look at him in 5 years and be like, isn't it great that Shia turned his life around? And then 5 years after that we go, oh, isn't it a shame that Shia's fucking fallen off the wagon again? Or reverse it, flip it, whatever way it happens. We have no idea where it's going to go. But yeah, I mean, I would recommend going, if you haven't seen them, watch Borg McEnroe, watch Fury, watch Lawless, and just you can definitely see him for beyond it just being, oh, it's Shia LaBeouf, and whatever associations you might have with him. I also tried to watch Nymphomaniac once, but it was hard to sit through. I didn't finish it.
Is it Lars von Trier?
Lars von Trier, yeah. And I don't know if this is true or urban legend, but Shia has a sex scene and supposedly Lars von Trier made them actually have sex on camera, but I don't know if that's true. But it's certainly the kind of thing that Shia would have gone for, regardless of that tidbit of misinformation. That kind of film, I think he's a bit of a student of film, and I think if Lars von Trier, he got a whiff of him making a movie, or if Lars von Trier came to him and was like, hey, I'm doing a movie about sex, he'd be like, I'm in.
Yeah, right.
He'd do it for free.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You were saying a while ago. Sorry to circle back to something you've already talked about, but the word redemption it was interesting to me because I read an interview on genmedia.com with Jeffrey LaBeouf, Shia's dad, after the film had come out, and he's obviously never shies away from the opportunity to talk. Apparently, the journalist has sent him a Facebook message, said, "Hey, do you want to do an interview?" And he was like, "Yep." And they were like Skyping or whatever that same day, and off it goes. But Jeffrey LaBeouf talks about redemption, or to be more accurate, he uses the word reparation,
Right.
both in terms of what this movie is and him and Shia's relationship in real life. He loves the word reparations. I think he's quite a spiritual sort of and a religious man. He's been through programs and
that
in and
comes
out
across in the movie.
Yeah. But he likes the word reparations. So it goes on for a bit, and then the interviewer says, "Do you mean redemption?" To which he says, he laughs and says, "If you have a flat tire, you're going to repair that tire before you go anywhere. That's reparation. That's what Shia and I have gone through in our relationship. Redemption, that's between me and God. And I don't think there's anything I can do personally on this planet that's going to cause any sins to go away." So redemption is an interesting question around this film, because if Jeff LaBeouf wanted any form of redemption, if we use our word, he had no outlet for it to the wider world, whereas Shia... Well, I guess I have a question. Is this movie an opportunity for Shia to redeem himself, or was it an exercise in redeeming his dad? Or both, or neither. I don't know.
I would say, and this is where my frustration comes in, it's both, because the point of the movie ultimately is not becoming the monster that your parents were or tried to make you to be, right? And it's trying to escape that loop of my grandfather was an alcoholic, my father was an alcoholic, and I am an alcoholic. And my grandfather was a toxic, abusive person, so my father was an abusive, toxic person, so I am an abusive, toxic person. And what I see is, and I think the point of the father that he plays is, his father never had the opportunity to be anything other than the man that he had become, right? Even by the time he became sober, he was a convicted felon, so he couldn't get a job. He was stuck in his ways, suffering in a relationship that, well, he lost his relationship, he lost his marriage. The only thing that he had was a son that had independently become successful and that he could latch himself onto. Right? And his father is interestingly portrayed as a victim of circumstance in the movie. Undoubtedly he's a monster, but he's a victim of circumstance. And his son is a victim of him. But his father never had the opportunity to redeem himself in the way that Shia LaBeouf has had.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm driving at. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And that's kind of what this movie is they say, oh, it's not just an exercise in therapy. And it's not, right? It is, an amazing movie. It's a piece of art all on its own. But this is something that very, very few people have ever had the chance to do, is this encapsulation of yourself and your life and your subconscious and everything else. And so now that I've seen this, who do I feel more sympathetic towards, I think is the question. And it's difficult to say now, because in the movie I feel sympathetic towards Shia LaBeouf, right? To the child, to Otis, right? Not to the performance by Shia LaBeouf. You feel sympathetic towards the child because all he wants is his father to love him, but his father is incapable of, like, holding his hand is the example that they give, right? It's a really powerful. He just wants to hold his father's hand, but he can't do it, right? His father just can't do it. And he gives across like, oh, I don't want people to think I'm a paedophile. He calls him like chicken hawk or something like that. I don't want people to think I'm a chicken hawk. But his father is incapable of giving what his son needs, whereas Shia is very capable of that level of empathy, because that's what the whole thing is about. So who is it about redeeming? I don't think it's about redeeming his father. It's about understanding a broken person. And the movie does a great job of that. And his father is searching for a redemption that he can't reach. But do I kind of believe that Shia LaBeouf should be able to reach his own redemption given everything that the world has given him? Like, granted, plus the trauma and, everything we see in the movie. Yeah, I wish he could kind of get his shit together, because it's not just him that suffers from it, right?
Yeah.
And if it was him that was suffering, I would have sympathy for it. I would have sympathy for him. But the fact that he's hurting other people, and that it's one of the actresses in this movie, and that it was in such a personal way, it does affect how I view the movie and how I view his story within the movie as well. But yeah, I don't know where to go from there.
No.
With the podcast and with my thoughts on Shia LaBeouf as well himself.
Sure.
I was going to say I feel betrayed by the movie in a way.
Oh.
Because it is so beautiful, and it's so well done, and it's so well created, that I want my heart to be open to this person. But the person who did open their heart to him was abused. And so I feel like I've been tricked into opening myself up to understanding someone who hurts the people that are closest to them in such an extreme way. And if I didn't know the news about Shia LaBeouf and FKA Twigs, and if it wasn't FKA Twigs, if it was somebody else, then maybe I would feel different, even though the same thing happened. Right? But it's all too close. It's all too entwined, like you said earlier on. It's a web. It's all too entwined together with what the movie is trying to show you, and then his future girlfriend is fucking in the movie. Right? So it's like, it's a movie about reality that then becomes reality that is then corrupted. And it's like a feedback loop. It's like an echo chamber.
That's nice. Nice imagery.
Yeah. There aren't any other movies like that, so that I can think of.
No.
Like they've said, oh, maybe in the new Matrix film, it's going to be about the actor Keanu Reeves finding out that actually he's in the Matrix and he's Neo and he's passed on to the next level of the Matrix, which is him as actor Keanu Reeves. And then it's all going to be another... It's like what people have theorized about it. And, like, that's like a dumb version of what this has become.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if that is the story of the Matrix 4, I'd be like, Honey Boy did it better.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. I'd be surprised if they go down that route. That's for sure.
Well, let's move on to the next bit of the podcast, I think. Which is
maybe the bit that I dread the most.
Yeah. How much of you and your relationship with your father do you see in this movie?
The actual relationship between a son and his father, if I was the son in that dynamic, nothing, which is good, because I didn't grow up in that kind of dynamic at all. Nothing ever happened to me anything close to that. I did not have an abusive childhood, so I'm thankful and grateful for that. But there's something about the Lucas Hedges Shia or Otis in the movie that kind of it spoke to me and kind of worried me a bit, because there's someone has real real damage, and I feel like I've got a much smaller version of something. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that I suppose I worry that I could have gone that way with my own mental health issues in terms of violence or alcoholism, those kind of very destructive things, which very much aren't in my nature. So even at my most cracked, I would never, that's just not in me at all. But I suppose there's just this question of how far would I have to be pushed for that to become real. So I think just in terms of a sort of a mental health kind of thing, I was, I don't know, worried, a little bit anxious about it. But I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No,
I think maybe I romanticized it a little bit. If does that make sense? Like I like the idea of going to a place like rehab and dedicating all of your time to your well-being, mental and physically. I really think that would be great for anybody. If anyone's had suffered a little bit with these kind of things, or the greatest things like court mandated rehab like Shia went through, I think that would be for this generation who seem kind of our generation, I suppose, which are kind of detached from any other generation that's passed, because we've come through this upheaval in technology and changes in society that I think in previous generations have taken decades or centuries to happen. We've gone through, just in our lifetimes, we've gone through a bunch of them, and I think it's really hard to stay grounded and stay involved and invested in humanity and stuff. So yeah, I think it'd be great if everyone could have an opportunity just to go to a place that's about peace and calm and just being present and being kind of removed from technology and just being re-engaged with people and ourselves. I think that would be great, and I think I would benefit from that.
Yes, yeah. I think my feelings are somewhat similar, because I don't see any of my father in their relationship, thank God. But maybe this is part of my frustration with the movie and with Shia LaBeouf himself, is that I can see echoes of my behavior within the self-destructive actions that the character takes, and that idea that that I can reach a point where that is no longer the case I think is something that we all strive to, right? We all want to be better people, and if we have problems in our relationships, we all say, I'll be better, right? I'll change, I'll make changes. And one of the great fallacies in our lives is we have a problem in our relationship and we say, I'll be better, right? But we try, and then we fall back into old patterns, and that is kind of what the father character played by Shia LaBeouf is all about, right? It's this, he says he's going to try and be better, and he tries to be better, but ultimately he can't change the person that the world has made him. And I guess that's part of what we're seeing with Shia LaBeouf himself, is that even though he's been given this unique opportunity in which to exercise those demons, he's still unable, this hasn't changed him fundamentally as a person. He's still gone back to being that, I'm sorry I hurt everyone closest to me. Well, you just made a movie exactly, you were given your chance to, literally in your performance, to become a better, to lose that part of yourself, to become somebody else. And maybe you can't. Maybe it's not possible for us to become other people. And that is maybe part of the example that I'm taking away from this. Is like maybe we can't. Maybe we can try. We can always try to be better, and we can always do our best to not hurt the people that we love, and to but can we change who we are? And Honey Boy the movie would suggest possibly. But Honey Boy the reality suggests no. For the moment. And again, maybe, as you were saying, the story isn't finished. He, as all of us, are ever evolving tapestries, and the beauty of the movie is that it finishes. Whereas, for us, it doesn't finish until the great beyond, right? Until Thanos turns up and snaps his fingers. But yeah, how the reality of the movie makes me feel about it tinges my view of the movie, and his own redemption talks to my own, how I feel about wanting to change things in my life. Yeah, I don't want to end up feeling like I'm that kind of person that has the chance to get rid of, who can go to therapy or go to counselling or try to become a better person. And then when somebody opens up to me, it just, the whole thing repeats again. I don't want to be like that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. No. There's that bit at the end of the movie where we talked about before, where Lucas Hedges' age, Otis, in kind of a dream or imaginary state, goes back to the motel where he spent time as a child and gets face to face with his dad again, who's in his whole rodeo clown makeup thing. And they sit, and James, Shia LaBeouf's character, says, "Nobody's mad at me anymore, and that's all I really wanted." Mm-hmm. And he seems quite happy and content in this version of his dad, and that's kind of just was brought back to mind by what you were saying there. It's just what it takes for people to be okay is different, and sometimes it's not a lot.
Yeah. But I am mad at Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely deserving of some outrage.
Yeah.
At the moment.
And I wasn't mad at him before today. Right? I didn't even think about him. And now we watch this movie, I'm fucking furious at him because he made me care. He made me care, and that's the problem with opening empathy. Right, is the moment you open up empathy, you don't just open up the opportunity for love. Like, it's why being a Jedi is the only way, as we've discussed before. Right? The minute love leads to fear, and fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate. And the minute that you open up these doors of empathy, if you don't act in a way deserving of empathy, then you've twisted me to the dark side, and that's how I feel at the moment. I'm on the dark side of Shia LaBeouf. I'm gonna send him a message with my Darth Vader. Shia, I'm not your father. You were your father in that movie that I saw.
It was good.
It was a good movie, Shia.
Before we finish, did you read about the sort of Mel Gibson? I mentioned Mel Gibson earlier, but did you read about the anecdote kind of involving Mel Gibson in this movie?
No. Did he wear Shia LaBeouf like a beaver sock puppet?
See, that would be a great sequel to The Beaver, which I also thought was a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
But it's good. I suggest to watch that. But
is the beaver his son?
So Shia's in rehab and he's writing sort of a script for what will turn out to be Honey Boy as part of his rehabilitation. And at this point, he hasn't spoken to his dad in 7 years. They're completely estranged. But when he gets out, and he's already sent his script off to the director, Alma Har'el, and he says, says to his dad, "Hey, I want to make a movie about you." But at that point, he's also sent the script off to Mel Gibson, who I presume is a friend or at least someone he has contact with, and says to Mel Gibson, "I'd like you to play my dad." Mel Gibson passes on it, but when Shia goes to see his dad, he says, "Hey, I want to make a movie about you, and Mel Gibson's going to play you." And it turns out that Jeff LaBeouf is a huge Mel Gibson fan. And so he was like, "Oh, sure." So then Shia puts the contract on the table that signs away his rights for the movie under the auspices of that he's going to be played by Mel Gibson, and then he has to go back to him later and be like, yeah, Mel Gibson's not doing it, I'm playing you instead. And that would have been an interesting conversation to be a fly on the wall
for someone who is so competitive with their son. For their son to say, your screen icon is going to play you, and then, oh wait, no, he's not. I'm going to play you.
I am. Yeah.
Oh, oh, yeah. That must have been something.
Yeah, that would have been sweet.
All right. Next week, let's do something a little bit more clear cut. Because
well, yeah, it's been good to delve into something that wasn't so, but yeah, maybe something more upbeat and lighthearted.
Again, Honey Boy. Fucking great movie. So well written, so well acted, so well directed. But this is one of those films where I can't separate him from the movie. And you shouldn't, because it's fucking the movie is Even Stevens. Right? they took scene for scene some of those shots from Even Stevens. I watched a YouTube video of like which bits in Honey Boy were actually from the TV show. Even a lot of it was. So we're not supposed to separate it. And when it's a movie about fallible people being fallible, and ultimately he's too fallible for my empathy. So next time we're doing.
That's it summarised.
Yeah, we're doing Lion King 2: Simba's Pride.
Classic.
I've never seen it, so we'll have to add it to the list, I guess. Which episode is this? Do you remember which episode number this is?
I don't know. 17 maybe.
I think it might be after
16.
Right, let me Google.
I don't know. We're so prolific.
Yeah,
we just churn them out. The first 4 episodes took us about 6 months to a year to do, and then since we've come back, it's been a whole other story.
Well, this is episode 19, which means
really?
Yeah, next time will be episode 20, which means we've got to do something. We've got to do something big for episode 20.
Well, this will take some brainstorming then.
Yes. All right. If you guys have any recommendations for what you'd like to see us do for episode 20, if you made it this far, Shia LaBeouf, he's been listening.
Has he? Hi, Shia, big fan.
Yeah, and hopefully FKA Twigs, my local West Country girl, has been listening. FKA Twigs, I haven't listened to any of your music, but your acting was great in this movie, and I love that you're from the West Country, so I'm going to go and listen to your music now. And yeah, let us know what you want us to do next time, FKA Twigs.
Yeah, we're going to do whatever FKA Twigs asks us to do. That's a promise.
FKA Twig, tweet me and let me know what you I don't know. It's really hot in here.
It's like she's in the room and you're trying to ask her out, and suddenly
oh no, remember she's from Cheltenham.
Is that posh though? That's where the races are.
Yeah, a little bit. But I've got my hat. I've got my cap that I've been.
You've got
wearing
your Guy Ritchie cap on right now.
Yeah. This is what you wear to the races. So it's all right. Yeah.
And a tweed 3-piece suit, and drink some David Beckham whiskey. Hay Club, whatever that is. Oh, if anyone can hear rustling, it's because Dom is diving into the cupboard behind him. He's sliding on a suit jacket.
Okay. This is my FKA Twigs asking on a date attire.
Is your Chromeo Beirut t-shirt kind of a icebreaker?
Yeah, I feel like she'll be like, oh, I love Chromeo. And I'll be like, I knew you did, FKA Twigs. I knew it. I haven't listened to your music yet, but I knew you like Chromeo.
You look very dapper.
Thank you very much. And thank you for listening to all of this.
Oh yeah, shit, we're still recording. We haven't wrapped up yet.
And we'll see you next week on another episode of Daddy Issues. Bye.
Peace.